You went to bed. You wake up. It's been 8, 10, 12 hours since you last ate. So you check your blood sugar. And what does it show? That it's still high. Where the heck does that high sugar even come from? In this video, I'm going to break down where that sugar comes from, why it's high in type 2 diabetes, and what you can do to get it down in the morning. I'm Cory. Me and my partner Brian are two pharmacists that help people lower their blood sugar and reduce their reliance upon medications. And to understand why your fasting sugar is still high in the morning, even if you haven't eaten in a long time, we have to start with the organ that's in charge of it all. And it's our liver. So even though you're asleep, your body still needs to function, which means that we often require glucose to run a lot of our basic functions in our body. And if you're not eating, that glucose has to come from somewhere. Enter the liver. The liver is where we produce glucose. It's called gluconeogenesis. We also can release it from stores in our liver, stored as glycogen. In a metabolically healthy person, when blood sugar drops, we release glucose from our body stores, our liver, our muscles, is in the form of glycogen, and everything works fine because when we eat and our blood sugar rises, insulin rises to lower that sugar, and that insulin shuts the liver production of sugar off. With insulin resistance, your liver may produce sugar even when your body doesn't need it. In fact, your liver can become insulin resistant. So even though insulin rises in the body, signaling that there's higher sugar in the body, your liver keeps kicking out sugar, thus keeping your sugar higher. So what's happening with type 2 diabetes overnight, part of the reason that your sugar is high in the morning is that even though you're not consuming any food over the course of the night, your liver is just pumping out sugar even when it doesn't need to. Your fasting sugar isn't just telling you what you ate. It's telling you how well your insulin and your liver are communicating. And with type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance, that communication often isn't happening well, and your liver is producing glucose even when your body doesn't need it. Another reason that your glucose might be higher in the morning is what's called the dawn phenomenon. In a normal metabolically healthy person, before we wake up, we have a release of a few hormones that are preparing our body for the day, to go out, to hunt, to live as we used to do. Part of that release is the release of glucose from the liver because we need glucose to get in our muscles, fuel it, and fuel it for the day, even though we haven't eaten yet. So this rise of sugar before we eat, and oftentimes we see this in our patients and our clients, is what's called the dawn phenomenon. And when we have insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, that dawn phenomenon could be exaggerated. So when people see a high fasting number in the morning, they immediately think of what they ate for dinner last night or maybe a few snacks they had before bed. And it's not just that simple that I ate too many carbs for dinner. And while that might be the case, there's a host of other things that could be going on. Because if you didn't have a good night of sleep, if you were restless, if you had bad dreams, that stress can release the stress hormone called cortisol, which tells our body to release more glucose. So while we may have eaten the perfect meal, if we were stressed at night, either from stress itself or from poor sleep, our body might be releasing glucose, even though our body doesn't need the glucose because we're not actually fighting a fight. We were having the stress of it, or maybe a bad dream. The important thing is to not stress out over a single high fasting reading. As I said, sleep, bad dreams, stress, a late meal, alcohol, and illness, all of these things can affect your blood glucose, the hormones that regulate glucose, and lead to a higher number in the morning. So now what? We know why our liver produces glucose. We know why that leads to a higher sugar in the morning. What can we do about it? There's good news and bad news. The bad news is there's no magic fix for a high fasting glucose. The good news is there is a fix. Overall, we just need to become more metabolically healthy. Type 2 diabetes is a disease of energy toxicity and insulin resistance. We have too much energy, there's nowhere for the body to store it, and our body literally becomes resistant to insulin because there's nowhere to put that energy. So what's the first thing that we can do to get ourselves in a place where we can improve that morning number? We can build muscle. I mentioned earlier that the liver stores glucose in the form of glycogen and releases it in the body. The liver's only so big, but we want to store more glycogen in case we have more activity that we need to engage in. Where does it store it? In the skeletal muscle. It's actually one of the primary sites of glucose storage in the form of glycogen. So when you build more muscle, you are giving your body a larger storage tank for that glucose to go. And when you are eating or having sugar in your body, in your blood, there's more places for it to go, so it'll come down more easily. Another thing that you can do is experiment with eating an earlier dinner and limit late night eating. Now, this doesn't help for everybody. As I mentioned, that dawn phenomena can raise that sugar in the morning regardless of meals. But oftentimes we find that with our patients and our clients that those meals in the evening are creeping into 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And even if it's not a meal, even if it's a snack, what you're eating is raising sugar overall, so it's not having as much time to come down over the course of the night. Now, very rarely will you find anyone recommend eating a late meal. Very rarely will you find someone who feels good in the morning after eating a late meal. So our recommendation would be to try to limit the late night eating as much as possible, and of course, limit late night snacking. If you're feeling the need to snack after meals, it's either a habit that you've got to get out of, or you're just not eating enough satiating foods at dinner. I mentioned earlier that poor sleep can lead to higher sugar in the morning. So prioritizing your sleep is crucial for better sugar overall and in the morning when it's fasting. This means shutting down your screens before you go to bed, not reading anything that's going to make you upset, trying to turn that TV off. And prioritizing sleep is easier said than done, especially if you raise your hand if you have young kids around. But knowing that this is something that is within our control to help improve those sugars is possible and doable. Another simple intervention that you have control over is to take a walk after dinner. Just a 5-minute walk after dinner can reduce the post-meal blood sugar spike. And when we're reducing the spike, we're going from a lower number overall. So overnight, it's dropping from a lower number. And if it rises, it's rising from a lower number. And regardless of what your fasting sugar is in the morning, we think it's a great idea to make sure you're walking after every meal. And remember, we want to look at trends. If you wake up with one higher fasting number, we don't like it, but let's not freak out about it. Let's take a step back, let's look at the overall trend, and if you start seeing a trend, then it's time to start experimenting. Is it what I'm eating? Is it when I'm eating? Is it I'm not moving? Is it I'm sleeping poorly or not prioritizing that good sleep? Because too often we see one bad number and we think everything's falling apart. Now, we shouldn't ignore a really high number, but the truth is we want to step back and see what that trend is before we start taking drastic action or feeling like we're failing. So in closing, if your morning sugar is high, just don't assume that your dinner the night before betrayed you. Remember, your liver has been working the night shift. If you found this video helpful, make sure to subscribe and share it with a friend who's struggling with their morning blood sugar. And if you enjoyed this, we think you're going to love the Diabetes Remission Roadmap podcast. It's a twice monthly show where my co-host Brian and I, another pharmacist, go through more in depth how you can reduce your sugar and limit your need for medications. Now go out there, see what you can do to lower your fasting number, and as we always say on the podcast, keep it simple and do what works.